probably one of my most favourite people in the whole world. And I just was saying to him, whenever I talk about Peter Egan, because I do, everybody says, I love Peter Egan. And I'm really going to start the Peter Egan fan club, because he is the nicest guy, and we are so blessed to have him at VegFest. So thank you. Shall we just really have a massive, 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 huge welcome to Peter Egan. What are you doing? You're counting your money.
Money well spent.
2p. Would you like to take a pew on the comfy sofa?
Thank you very much.
Peter Egan.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Peter. Wow.
Hello.
We're on the stage again. Now, you and I met a fair few years ago. We had a good giggle, talked about animals, but you was not vegan then. That was before. Right. That was just when you were changing. So when was that then? When did you decide, I fancy being vegan?
Well, I decided to give up eating meat 10 years ago when I watched... have you seen a film called Earthlings, anyone? Yeah? Well, that's a really seminal film, and I watched that film 10 years ago, and when I finished watching it, my wife came in to the kitchen, and I was sitting there with my mouth open. She thought I'd had a stroke, and she said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "I've just watched the most devastating film in my life about industrialized slaughter, and I'm never going to eat meat again." And that was 10 years ago, and I stopped eating meat then. And I've always been engaged with animal welfare of one kind and another, but I didn't kind of put together all the dots, about dairy and the things you're talking about, breast milk and things like that. And I was talking to Jill Robinson. I'm an ambassador or a patron for about 20 different charities. I spend my life engaged with the most important issue, I think, of our century, which is animal welfare. And she said, I went to China. Jill Robinson, anyone know Animals Asia? Anyone ever heard of that? It's a magnificent charity, and she's the most inspiring woman I've ever met in my life, apart from my wife, of course. And my wife rescued me, but Jill rescues bears. And so we were talking. She's a vegan, and she said, fish mate for life as well. And so I decided to give up eating fish, and then I spoke to someone else about dairy, and they introduced me to the horrors of the dairy industry, which we take it for granted. I've taken eating what I ate all of my life. I became a vegetarian at 62. I'm 72 now. So you don't look it, please, someone. And so
we were all thinking it.
We're all working. God, he looks about 80. Anyway, so I then decided. I just decided to go vegan. But then Veganuary, who also had heard that that I had become vegan, said, well, why don't you come out, as they say, and do Veganuary, which I did, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And that's the kind of journey, as far as I am concerned. But it's the driver for me is being an ethical vegan. It is also to do with, I've got 5 rescue dogs, and I look at my animals, my lovely dogs, and I adore them all, and they taught me about not being cruel and not eating. If I can't eat my dog, then I can't eat a cow or a pig. And so I don't know how I got onto dogs, but I love them. And that's also part of the animal welfare, the journey, how important our planet is. So I spend a lot of time traveling the world. I was in Indonesia 3 weeks ago, visiting in North Sulawesi, what they call the extreme markets in Tomohon and Langkawi. Have you ever heard of those markets, anyone? It's where they kill anything that has a beating heart, and they do it publicly in front of their children. They kill cats and dogs, blowtorch them. They cut up snakes when they're alive. They have rats. They have bats. They have everything that you can think of, and it is destroyed publicly in this extraordinary market. And I was asked to go there by the Dog Meat Free Indonesia campaign, which I'm an ambassador for as well, just to kind of raise awareness at a time when people are booking their holidays. And Indonesia depends very, very much on tourism as an industry. So I went out there just to kind of raise awareness. Now, even if I hadn't been a vegan, I would have been devastated by what I saw, because you go into this enormous market, and they produce wonderful vegetables and fruit in Indonesia. Obviously, it's very tropical, and so these fantastic smells of papaya and melon and strawberries, sweet smells, just kind of sort of infuse your sort of nostrils as you're going in. And I went with a remarkable young woman called Lola Weber, who is part of the Dog Meat Free Indonesia campaign. And I said, Lola, this smell is incredible. It's really intoxicating. It's very sweet. And she said, you wait. And then we started to go to the farthest corner of the market, and that's where they do all the butchering. And literally, from walking from here to that music stand there, everything changed. And I wanted to vomit because the smell was so disgusting. And I was walking through intestines which were on the floor, and seeing live snakes being cut up. And of course, I won't go into the detail of the dogs and cats because it will horrify you. But I know that I will never forget it for the rest of my life. I don't want to apologize for being upset. It's always embarrassing when you get upset, but it is devastating. But it's devastating for the cats and the dogs, but it's also devastating for the pigs and for the cows and for the lamb and for the ducks. They all die horribly. There is no such thing as humane slaughter. It doesn't exist. There are different levels of cruelty. And that is the very reason why I feel exhilarated to be vegan, because I have taken cruelty out of my life. And it's had a profound effect on me personally, also in my relationship with human beings, because I feel deeply compassionate about my fellow human beings as I feel deeply compassionate about the animals who are so badly abused. I think when you take destruction and slaughter out of your life, you get a very clear relationship with how important life is, how important our planet is, how important compassion is, how important love is. And these things, I believe, are things that are educated out of us as children. Because if you take the usual kind of image, like, you know, the child is out in the garden playing with her pet rabbit, and she goes indoors and says, "Mum, what's for dinner?" And Mum says, "Rabbit, darling." And there is a disconnect between what you play with. I interviewed a dog meat trader in Sulawesi. He'd been killing dogs for 35 years, and I worked out that in his lifetime he'd killed over 100,000 dogs. And I said, "Do you not like dogs?" And he said, through an interpreter, "Oh, yes, I like dogs. I have a dog myself." I said, "Well, you have a pet dog?" He said, "Yes, I have a pet dog." I said, "Would you eat your dog?" And he said, "Oh, no, I wouldn't eat my dog. If I want to eat dog, I come here and eat these dogs." So there is he had as much of a disconnect between the dog he would eat and his pet as normal carnivores have between eating cows, pigs, any other kind of living creature, and maybe their budgerigar or their cat or their, it's the same disconnect. It's just not as brutal and as extreme as it is in the extreme markets of Tomahan. Because if we are led to believe what the great corporations producing meat want us to believe, they want us to believe that all animals skip along to the abattoir quite happily because they can't wait to feed us.
It's always a pleasure to work with such compassionate people, compassionate guests, compassionate audience, and all the traders. It's just a really, really lovely event. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dave. And I'll hand you on to Karin for the final goodbye.
Oh, no, I think, aren't we all utterly, utterly inspired by Peter Egan? What an absolutely voice for the animals, puts himself in a horrendous situation just to raise awareness. More than 300,000 people have seen the posts that Peter's put up. It's made national newspapers. I really think that together we can really make a massive difference, and especially when you get absolute icons like Peter stepping up. Thank you to Dave for making us laugh. He is an absolutely, utterly brilliant comedian. Please do support Dave and Peter, and even Mike, even me on Veggie Vision. Please support our social media and just help us spread the message out there. And also, do tweet, do put a Facebook, do something. Maybe your friends might be inspired to come to VegFest tomorrow. So please, please do that as well. But thank you for being a wonderful audience. And maybe we'll see you tomorrow as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dave, Peter, Mike.